You know, Liberty Mutual Insurance customizes car insurance so you only pay for what you need. You know what? Honestly, that's all we really want. You know, fairness. We want it in sports, we want it in life. To all be treated fairly. And what's more fair than having you only pay for what you need? Way to go, Liberty Mutual. This message was brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. Visit libertymutual.com to learn more.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Geno Time Podcast here on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. We are brought to you by Bet Online. My name is Tom Westrom. I'm joined by Nicole Yang, Chris Grenham. And guys, we're going to talk quite a bit about Bradley Beal and about the rumors that are floating around regarding him and the Celtics and Jason Tatum and what the Celtics might give up for him and everything of that nature. Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report initially reported that Bradley Beal was considering his future essentially with the Washington Wizards. Jake also mentioned several teams that basically Beal would be amenable to a trade to if he does ultimately decide that he wants to ask the Wizards for a trade. Beal, of course, has 1 year left on his deal. The four teams on Jake's report were the Celtics, the Warriors, the Sixers, and the Heat, all of whom have sort of mildly interesting trade packages. The Warriors can offer a couple of lottery picks that are pretty mid in this year's draft, as well as, your James Wisemans or whatever it might be. The Heat can offer Tyler Hero, and the Sixers can offer Ben Simmons. Kind of a lot to unpack. Zach Lowe on ESPN with Adrian Wojnarowski said that he does not believe, essentially, the Celtics will trade Jaylen Brown for Bradley Beal. And Woj didn't say anything, but he did kind of vociferously shake his head and agreeing with Zach Lowe. So neither of those guys think that Jaylen is going to be on the table for Bradley Beal. So I'm just going to kind of leave it open-ended. Thoughts?
Like you said, there's a lot going on there. I think based on the other teams involved, my two takeaways are, one, if they are willing to part with Jaylen Brown, Celtics have the best offer, by far, and they should get the deal done. And two, you sort of have a James Harden dilemma on your hand in that if Bradley Beal goes to the Miami Heat, good luck. If Bradley Beal goes to the Philadelphia 76ers, still good luck. It's going to create a problem in the East. And there already are two problems in the East with the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks and obviously the Brooklyn Nets. It's just going to make the Celtics' life infinitely harder if Bradley Beal goes somewhere in the Eastern Conference. So I think they do have to consider that. And then, the last thing, it's sort of a given because we've talked about it so many times. You have to think that this shores up Jason Tatum's future. I just think Bradley Beal, if he does in fact re-sign, if they have some success, if they can keep them as a core together. And Grenham also tweeted out a screenshot of Tatum commenting on an Instagram that was he could get traded, and Tatum comments a shamrock. Okay, that's public. Jaylen Brown can see that. Other people, other teammates can see that. So we've talked about whether Tatum's watching his words, fanning the flames. Tatum is out there with us, fanning the flames too. There's a lot of things to consider here, and I think it'll be an interesting watch. I feel like he will end up getting moved. I feel like this stuff doesn't come out and the outcome ends up being he stays with the Wizards, but it's also to their advantage. I can't imagine he'll resign, so they might as well try and get something now.
That shamrock is, that's U.S. Tatum's problem. This is Tokyo Tatum, and he's not worried about what U.S. Tatum has to deal with when he gets home in 2 weeks. So he's just letting the emojis fly in the comments. Yeah, I definitely agree with your point that this matters not only to help the Celtics roster, say they try to make a move to improve their own roster. It's very obvious, but they need to prevent this guy from going to the Sixers, from going to the Heat, from going elsewhere, because they already have a monumental climb within the Eastern Conference as it stands right now, and that's only going to get harder if he gets moved to another one of those other potential contenders. So they have to consider that. That's an unbelievably important point. I have a multitude of thoughts on this as a Wizards fan, as someone who follows the Celtics closely. We go through this every offseason, it feels like, with Bradley Beal. Is Bradley Beal going to stay? Is he not? He has been very loyal toward the Wizards. He really has been, and he seems to have committed to Tommy Shepard time and time again. But it feels like it's been building to this where at some point he's going to be sitting with himself thinking, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think I need to move on, which is completely understandable. But it feels like this is that point. We're probably going to get some bigger news within the next couple days before the draft. I think it's getting closer to inevitable.
That's the one thing that Tom, I guess, omitted in his initial overview was that Beal acknowledged via report that he does have to come to this decision prior to the draft. So we will get it actually pretty soon with the draft being on Thursday.
And that was one of my big takeaways. This is tough timing for the Celtics. Like this all being right now, it's a little too soon for them. Like there is a world where this all works out perfectly for the Celtics and they get to like, you know, cruise into having like a super team of some kind, or, you know, whether it's like maybe this goes to the trade deadline and all of a sudden like the Wizards are really staring down the barrel of the gun and like Beal can put even more pressure on them saying like, I'm only going to re-sign in Boston, like whatever. There's a lot of areas where this works out. Coming out right now and having this all happen right now, it's tough for the Celtics. Like, because all of the things that you guys said, I think are exactly right. Like, imagine having to deal with Bradley Beal and Joel Embiid. Imagine having to deal with Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo. Like, good luck. Those are tough teams in the Eastern Conference. That's not even getting to Brooklyn. And it's tough for the Celtics, too, because, like, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Bradley Beal could compete with Brooklyn. That's a really good squad. And, like, if there was any way that you could get Bradley Beal without giving up Jaylen Brown, all of a sudden you got a team. But from a timing perspective, it's really hard for the Celtics. Like, this is just not when they wanted this to necessarily happen. And I mean, you could have seen it coming, obviously, with like this being the offseason, you know, before his contract is due. But I mean, just even like a couple more weeks probably would have helped them a little bit. It's happening very quickly, I would expect, for the Celtics.
Yeah, very quickly. And another thing that keeps popping into my head is how the market is going to evolve. And a lot of that really, really depends on what Tommy Shepard thinks of Ben Simmons. Say the Wizards do have serious interest in Ben Simmons, which is totally possible. Who knows if they do. Ben Simmons is a very good defender. I don't want him on the Wizards, but that's just, I'm not Tommy Shepard. So say they do, there's a very good possibility that if the Celtics aren't willing to give up Jaylen Brown, that becomes the best offer on the market.
Conversely, though, if they are low on Ben Simmons, then maybe there is a world where the Celtics can construct a trade package. Like, the Celtics do have other good assets other than Jaylen Brown. Obviously, the easiest option here is Jaylen Brown because you can probably do it 1-for-1 or something moderately close to that, like Jaylen plus Romeo or something.
Jake Fisher's report, in his report, he said basically like it was likely to cost Jaylen Brown and like every available pick. And I was like, I don't think that's going to happen.
That seemed very steep.
Yeah, I think if you're getting Jaylen Brown, you're getting the best young player that you could possibly get. Like that's, you take that one.
Right. No, for sure. But maybe there is a world if they are low on Ben Simmons, if they are low on Tyler Hero, they aren't particularly enthused with who they could draft with the Warriors picks. They don't really like James Wiseman. None of these players are a no-brainer like Jaylen Brown. So maybe there is a way where you can construct some sort of package involving whatever they want in terms of Robert Williams, Marcus Smart, Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Nesmith, Romeo Langford, like whoever they like, and then a bunch of first-round picks. Like maybe there is some way where that does work out, and maybe Beal does try and assert himself a little bit more in the negotiation by saying, I want to be in Boston. I'm not going to re-sign with whoever else and force his way. Like that seems unlikely. Like I don't think that's presented itself right now, and there's not that much time for it to come to light, but it's possible.
No, I think that's like here, the thing with that, Nicole, is I agree with you. I think the one thing I think the concern from the Celtics perspective would be that my guess is the Wizards would make Jaylen Brown the pressure point. Yeah, the Celtics could offer every pick under the sun and Aaron Nesmith and Robert Williams and Marcus Smart and all this stuff. That's not really any different than a Heat package of like Tyler Hero and every pick under the sun. That's not really that different than like a Sixers package of like Tyrese Maxey and whatever and every pick under the sun. It's just like, it's just not that different. So I think the Wizards would probably do that and then say to the Celtics, like, we will trade you Bradley Beal, but like your price is Jaylen Brown, take it or leave it because we can get this from anybody else.
From the Wizards' perspective, there's no point in doing anything but that.
And if that is the Celtics offer, all that stuff, then the Warriors offering 7 and 14 is a better offer anyway. Then they get their own young guys who they get to choose from. And I think the only way, I think the one shred of hope that I think Celtics fans could have that Jaylen Brown would not be the price is that Beal is the one who could do that. Like you said, Nicole, he could make that request. Like, that's really the only way it could happen. Now, the thing about Bradley Beal is that he strikes me as somebody who actually does care about Washington and who probably does want to do right by them. And, doing right by that is not like making sure they get the smallest package back. So I don't know. It's complicated. But I think to me, that's the only way that a Tatum, Jalen, Beal package comes together.
That's kind of why I mentioned him being loyal toward Tommy Shepard and the Wizards organization before, because from all these reports, Jake Fisher, Shams, Woj, and Zach Lowe, it seems like Bradley Beal is legitimately torn. There's been a lot of reports that he's taking the weekend to kind of sort this out a little bit. I do think he's actually torn. Otherwise, I don't know how to say this. I don't think he would be taking this amount of time, but more than anything, I just don't think it's Bradley Beal's like MO to just kind of bullshit here and actually hang the Wizards out to dry a little bit. Like, I actually do think there is some genuine toughness about this decision for him.
I would buy that there's some toughness about the decision. I kind of don't buy that he's like still really mulling it over. I feel like if this comes out, then like he's kind of made his decision and he's sort of like getting ready to let everybody down easy. Like,
that lines up with your theory how once a rumor starts in the NBA, there's no stopping it. That would line up, and it does make a lot of sense here.
This is like the soft launch, and then
the
grand opening is going to be tomorrow or Tuesday.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Liberty Mutual Insurance customizes car insurance so you only pay for what you need. You know what? Honestly, that's all we really want, fairness. We want it in sports, we want it in life. That's why all sports we love have rules. That's why we have offsides, so players don't float down the field or the ice and get cheap breakaways. That's why there are foul poles, sidelines, and out of bounds. In sports, the goal of fairness is built right in. Life doesn't work that way, as we all know, but Liberty Mutual is trying to make insurance work that way. That's what only paying for what you need is all about. And when you do that, you can also save a lot of money. So switch and save when you customize your car and home insurance with Liberty Mutual and only pay for what you need. What's more fair than that? Way to go, Liberty Mutual. This message was brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. Visit libertymutual.com to learn more.
Then the question is, do we think the Celtics should or would give up Jaylen Brown? You have an asset in Jaylen Brown, whether he's going to be a trade asset or whether he's going to be a part of your core. You just have to commit one way or the other. If Bradley Beal goes to Philadelphia or Miami, the Celtics are going to have to make some moves. Like re-signing Evan Fournier would be a good start. They need like one more like kind of splashy move in free agency to round this out and give them any sort of hope. And injuries happen. You never know. Like if you're a good enough team, you can make a run. They have to do something. If they're going to hang on to Jaylen Brown, and they actually want to be title contenders, which they should want to do if they're trying to keep Jason Tatum, they have to pull something else. Otherwise, I think, sure, go all in for Bradley Beal. I think either way, though, it's about the commitment. Like, both are good options, but you just have to commit to it. Like, if you're going to keep Jaylen Brown, actually build a team around Jaylen and Jason. They're saying it, Brad's saying all the right things, and Ime is saying that these are the two pillars. You can't just run it back, basically. That's not going to work.
Yeah, I think if you look at this team, the only logical kind of conclusion you could pull is that some combination of Aaron Nesmith, Peyton Pritchard, just the good young players on this team, some combination of them are going to have to be gone because you have to trade some of those players to bring in a veteran who you just kind of go, oh, interesting. That guy's pretty good. You have to do that.
Which is okay because you don't need half of your roster being promising young guys if you're trying to win now.
Yeah, pick one.
I do think that
They're
Brad
all
Stevens,
the same level of good.
we haven't seen a lot of GM Brad Stevens, but I do think he's more likely to make that move than Danny Ainge would be, who seemed to become very attached to those promising young players, especially toward the end of his tenure. Going back to the original question on whether we think they would include Jaylen or not, I know I said this on an episode a couple weeks ago. At the conclusion of the season, right when they lost to the Nets, I would have said, without a doubt, they're willing to include Jaylen in a deal for someone like Bradley Beal. Post-Kemba trade, post-front office shakeup, post-Ime hire and press conference and listening to what Brad Stevens has to say, what Ime Udoka has to say, and seeing Woj and Zach Lowe, I don't see Brad Stevens being all that willing to put him on the table. I think he would try more so for that combination of young guys and a bunch of picks or something like that. I just think he would be more likely to do that than throw Jaylen right in there right off the bat.
if that's the case, like Jalen, Jason, Evan Fournier, Marcus Smart, Rob Williams, healthy Rob Williams at his potential, like that's a solid starting five. You just need to then hit on the contributors. Like you can't have a repeat of, I mean, he is an NBA champion now, but you cannot have a repeat of Jeff Teague and Tristan Thompson, basically. You know what I mean? Like
you have to hit on the depth pieces.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can hit on your other rotation players, that's a good situation too. Like that's a very viable, promising situation that the franchise should be excited about. But it's like a matter of if they hit on those other moves. And I think one of the reasons Zach mentioned in his segment was like, it doesn't really make sense to trade like a star for a star, but like Bradley Beal is offensively a better basketball player than Jaylen Brown in terms of like commanding a double team, which we've talked about all the time. Like who would you double, Bradley or Jason? Like that doesn't really present itself in the same way when it's Jalen and Jason. And then also obviously the friendship. So I do think it's not exactly like, oh, star for star swap. Like why would you do that? I think there are some differences between the two.
I think the biggest one is Tatum. And I think that like the emoji on Instagram puts the Celtics in such a tough position. It's almost like they have to go get Beal, because then otherwise you're starting off on the wrong foot with Tatum, who has now made it clear that he wants both Javonte Green and Bradley Beal on this team. I mean, he's wilding out. Like a GM Tatum is ready to challenge Brad Stevens. I think he's made it very clear that he wants both of those guys on this team. And like, I don't know what you do in a vacuum. I would not trade Jaylen Brown for Bradley Beal. I've thought about this a lot over the last like couple of weeks. Basically, my position has shifted on it. In a vacuum, just good player. I think Bradley Beal, like you said, he is a better offensive player. Jaylen is a better defensive player by a lot. Like Jaylen is younger. He has like more ceiling to him. He has a super team-friendly contract that runs through 2024. Like, he has all this stuff. But we're not in a vacuum. We're in this weird Celtics situation where their whole team is built around, like, as good as Jalen is, their team is built around Tatum. If the team is built around Tatum, the next decade of Celtics basketball is built around Tatum. And if he leaves, then the next decade of Celtics basketball comes tumbling down. I don't even think that going out and getting Bradley Beal guarantees that Tatum will stay. I just think that, like, it puts you in a better position. It gives you just a little bit more security in that regard, and you still have a good team. I don't know.
I think what you just laid out is correct. Like, I don't want it to get lost that we all love Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is a tremendous player and person. Like, this isn't against Jaylen Brown. Any team, I think, would be lucky to have two versatile wings, two-way wings as their core. But like you said, if Jason Tatum leaves and Jaylen Brown stays...
I also don't think that would happen. Look, this is just me guessing. This is not based on anything. I'm guessing Jaylen Brown has sussed out that this is Jason Tatum's team.
I would hope so.
I mean, I don't know how well that would sit. Imagine you're in Jalen's position. Like, would you love the organization making it clear over and over again that this is all Tatum? Like, I know the organization says the right things, but, like, everybody could tell.
Imagine Jaylen Brown seeing the Shamrock comment.
To be a fly on that wall.
No, and I think, like, sure, maybe it doesn't lock Tatum up guaranteed, but it shows, especially if they also sign Javonte Green, we are doing whatever we can. Like, we're catering to you. Like, we want to make you happy. Like,
how much do they want to cater, though? Like, I know you have to an extent, but do you want to get locked into what Houston got locked into with James Harden?
I don't know. I don't know what the right approach is, but I'm just saying, like, those two moves would clearly be catering to Tatum and clearly be, well, one, with Bradley Beal, like, you're still going to be really good, like, and a contender, especially if you make, like, auxiliary moves too. But you're hoping that he stays, which is obviously very important to the franchise.
And I guess the other thing is that I don't think Jalen and Jason dislike each other, obviously. But, I mean, we have a bunch of people who, like, have said these guys are not, like, friends. And, I mean, we've all been in the locker room. Like, again, they don't dislike each other. Like, we've been in those locker rooms. They don't dislike each other. They don't really hang out.
And that's okay. But from the Celtics' perspective, catering to Jason Tatum makes sense. It does make sense. And they hinted at the catering. They brought Emile Jefferson in to hang out during training camp. Like, they have hinted. Emile Jefferson. They have hinted at this catering before. So they're not afraid to do it. I'm curious to see if they really do end up doing major moves like that, because that was obviously like a training camp invite just to, like, go out to dinner with Tatum and hang out with him a couple times in Brighton. But I guess what I'm getting at is it all should come back to them trying to get Tatum to stick around long term, because Jaylen Brown is such a good player, but Jason Tatum has legitimate superstar potential that they need to make priority one.
this could be getting like way too ahead of ourselves, but I do think they have to think about these things. Like, will this inaction end up coming to bite them in the butt? Because unfortunately, Jaylen Brown is the collateral in this. But as you mentioned, Tom, like there have been multiple reports that they're not like besties. And if they're not good enough, it's just a bunch of inaction. And Jason Tatum's there like, what am I doing here? Like, we haven't tried to make this team better.
Thanks for giving me Javante, which you didn't give me Brad Beal.
Yeah, I could just see myself elsewhere, basically. Like, there's nothing tying me to Boston if we aren't actually championship contenders. Like, I mean, like we've mentioned before, Tatum is a guy that's really well liked. He's going to be recruited at the end of his extension. Yeah. Like, there is no doubt about that. So it's like, if you've done nothing to convince him to stay, I don't blame him. And they should see that coming. Like, you look at the Bucks, they went and got Drew Holiday. They gave up a lot for that, but it got them a championship. The Celtics are going to have to take some sort of swing, whichever side they commit to, whether the swing is Bradley Beal or the swing is a Drew Holiday-esque deal where they just give up a bunch of first round picks. But like, they have to do something, because I think the inaction is what could end up hurting them in the end.
Nicole, you've talked about how dangerous sort of the indecision is, and this is the same kind of thing. You sit around the indecision, that can lead you to becoming that middling team, that can lead you to no man's land, is a dangerous place to be. If they don't pick a path or at least take a swing or something, they could quickly end up in that no man's land, and that doesn't bode well for team success or for keeping Tatum around. You got to pick a road here at some point. That indecision is bad.
Danny Ainge, I think my theory with Danny Ainge is that the biggest mistake he made was not picking a path. Like, when he traded for Kyrie, you know, he was trying to straddle the line between like the present and the future. And then when that didn't work out, you know, what happened was then he just had Jaylen and Jason, and it was like, all right, I'm just building around you guys now. But it was too late. He had already like lost all of the future depth of like Rozier and the pick that ended up, you know, going to Cleveland that became Colin Sexton, and like all of this stuff that really would have helped if you were building a team around Jaylen and Jason was just gone because he had tried to straddle the two lines. And in doing so, he just ensured that the Celtics, like, instead of having a championship team, you know, he had this weird mishmash. And instead of having a young team with a ton of potential and a lot of like really interesting pieces, you know, he had a team with two really interesting pieces and then a bunch of just middling, you know, stuff. Like, you know, that's tough. Like, I think Tatum being well liked could really work out for the Celtics if he's the one doing the recruiting. But if he's not the one doing the recruiting, if there's any sniff that he's leaving, he's going to be recruited hard. You mentioned that coming back to bite them. So it might not bite them in the first year or the second year, but like, if they don't do what Tatum wants, like, yeah, like to your point, Nicole, when it comes back around, he's probably going to remember it. It's not like he's going to completely forget. He might put it aside, but it's still going to kind of be there.
And yeah, you mentioned Tatum could be a huge selling point for the Celtics. That's 100% true. Tatum's just going to have to want to sell people on Boston. Yeah. Who knows whether he's going to be interested in doing that. I think it's an important decision. And like you said, I don't think all of a sudden Tatum's going to be like out on the Celtics for the next 4 years. Like, once this decision is made with Bradley Beal, I don't think that's going to like be a talking point each season from now. But I do think if the Celtics don't have much postseason success over the next 4 years, when it comes time for him to make his decision, he'll think about those instances. It's a tough spot, especially for new GM Brad. For Danny Ainge, I think he would go for it at this time. I really do. Brad Stevens, I don't know.
Do we want to make our decisions if we think he's going to go to Boston?
Yeah.
Our Geno Time draft today is not going to be a draft, but it's still going to be a Shades on Beer Company segment. So our Bradley Beal predictions, I guess, on if he's going to come to Boston or not. It's not going to be a draft format. It's just going to be our yeses and nos. It's still going to be brought to you by our friends at Shades on Beer Company, the makers of the Geno Time Stout. I recently tried, along with my brother-in-law, the Juice Fountain 3, which is one of their other beers outside of the Geno Time Stout. Very good. My brother-in-law, I'd classify him as a beer aficionado, was a huge fan. So try the Juice Fountain 3 in addition to the delicious Geno Time Stout. You could try these beers down in West Kingston, Rhode Island at the Shades on Beer Garden and Tasting Room. So check that out if you're a Celtics fan in Rhode Island. And if you're a Celtics fan in New England, keep an eye out for Shades on Beer Company products.
All right, so for our draft today, we're all going to pick a side basically on two different topics. The first one, should the Boston Celtics trade for Bradley Beal and all of that implies. Follow-up question, do we think the Celtics will? Like, do we think that Bradley Beal will end up on the Celtics? Nicole, I know you're going to get to go first. So why don't you lead things off here?
I think the Celtics should do it. I think that's tough because, again, Jaylen Brown, great player, great person, nothing against Jaylen Brown, but it's Bradley Beal. Offensively, he is superior. Bradley Beal and Jason Tatum would be a tough duo. Yeah, he doesn't play defense. However, I do think he is athletic and capable enough to play some defense. He has expressed interest prior to entering the health and safety protocols in being a lockdown defender. He wanted to do that for Team USA. I think he is capable of being a defender, and I think that's like not a lost cause. But most importantly, like we've stressed all year, you got to keep Jason Tatum happy. I think that would be a step in accomplishing that. And I think there are other ways you can still augment the roster because you're giving up little else. Hopefully you can still work one of those ancillary moves. You re-sign Fournier, you keep Smart. Hopefully Rob reaches his full potential. I still think that's a good team. I say they should do it. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I just don't think it will end up happening. It's too soon. Timeline's too tight. New GM, Brad. Again, if it were Danny, I feel like we would be hearing reports already escalated and things like that. But given the circumstances, I say they should, but it will not happen.
So the first question, mine is actually going to be almost a perfect mirror image of Nicole's. I don't think they should do it. And I don't have a great reason why. I guess my honest to God reason is just because Jaylen Brown is really good. It's some nebulous answer. I don't have a ton of backing for it because all the things that Nicole said are exactly right, which is the reason why I think the Celtics might do it. I think they might do it.
Another reason why I think they should do it that I didn't list, Tatum has made his stance clear.
Yeah. No,
I guess why I'm bringing that up is because that could also be a reason for you and why you think they're going to do it is because Tatum has made his stance clear.
That's what complicates it for sure. I mean, and that basically it secures what you're saying, Nicole, is that if you want to feel good about your standing with Tatum, I think the thing about Beal is that he feels like a real security blanket with Tatum, right? You're okay, at least we have the Tatum thing covered. Because we went out and got Bradley Beal and we did what he wanted. And I'm I get that. And I still am just kind of yeah, but what if Jalen's really good at next year? And what if Tatum's really good next year? And what if the two of them just kind of work on the floor? What if, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just I think, I don't know what exactly the risk is, but there is risk in trading him for Bradley Beal. And, Beal is a superior offensive player. I'm not sure how much better an overall player he is than Jaylen Brown. I think he's a little better, but I don't know that it's cavernous, and Jaylen Brown is a lot younger. So I don't know. I don't think I would do it, but I can 100% see every rationale for doing it, which is why I kind of think the Celtics might.
You pose okay, what's the risk in trading Jaylen Brown? If they trade Jaylen Brown for Bradley Beal and then if this doesn't work.
Dear Lord.
Exactly. So I think
basketball wasteland for a decade.
Exactly. And there's already those narratives surrounding Boston as a free agent destination and all that stuff. So I think that's the risk is if it doesn't work out, if Tatum doesn't end up staying, which I think that would be a very low likelihood. I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest, but there is a risk in that.
The risk is very high. And Tom, I think you're spot on in saying that I think a lot of people who say, it's Bradley Beal, you have to trade for Bradley Beal. The talent gap isn't as big as those people say it is. Jaylen Brown's a really good all-around player. Bradley Beal's deficiencies on the defensive end make them closer to even than I think a lot of people realize they actually are. And yeah, if they trade for Bradley Beal by sending out Jaylen Brown and it doesn't work out, it is ugly for the foreseeable future. Very, very ugly. So the risk is super high. That being said, I'm going to side more on Nicole's side of things here, just because it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. You got to take your swings, one, because we've seen what's happened with other teams and even sometimes the Celtics when they stick in that middle ground and you end up in no man's land. It's a dangerous spot. Bradley Beal, that fit makes a lot of sense with the Celtics. He is a really good off-ball scorer. I know you're getting rid of Jaylen Brown, who is a tremendous all-around player and has a super high ceiling. He's still going to get better and better over the next couple of years. So there implies the risk we were just talking about. But I think if you have the opportunity to get an off-ball scorer like Bradley Beal, who really does fit nicely next to Tatum, not just because they're best friends, but also because he's a terrific off-ball scorer, I think you take your swing and you have to do it. Also for that latter point, because he's his best friend, you do have to prioritize Jason Tatum and prioritize him long-term on this team. Yeah, we checked off the Tatum thing. That's kind of important. I think that's kind of important. And again, I don't like the prospect of trading Jaylen Brown at all, but I like the prospect of bringing in Bradley Beal, shoring up Tatum's future with the team, and getting that premier off-ball scorer alongside of him. That being said, I don't think Brad Stevens is going to do it. I just don't see it. The timing, everything Nicole said is spot on. The timing just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for them, I don't think.
I guess my counter to this, the funny thing is that I disagree with you guys on the will they. So it's like, so it's weird. So it's like a weird argument here. I think the counter to the will they is, it's not like the Celtics haven't been having these conversations. It's not like this is the first time it has occurred to them. Oh man, what if we had to trade Jaylen Brown for Bradley? I promise they've talked about this more than we have. Like, I think they've probably made their calculus, as a front office. I think that if Beal becomes available, they will probably know, yes, we're going to give up Jaylen Brown, or no, we're not going to give up Jaylen Brown. They probably made that decision at this juncture. So yeah, it's coming up at a weird time and it's coming up fast, but like, and I know I'm countering what I said at the beginning of this podcast. They probably know. And Grenham, just real quick to piggyback off one of your points about fit, there is a lot of truth in that. Like Jaylen Brown is not far behind Bradley Beal as a basketball player, if he is behind him. But sometimes it isn't about that. Sometimes it is about fit. And if that's what the Celtics decide, then I guess I can certainly see that. If they think that the fit with Beal, the on-court fit is better, and you get the off-court stuff with Tatum, like you get to lock down both of those things, sure, like that makes a lot of sense to me.
I think the fact that we can both totally see each other's points goes to show that the Celtics have two really good options in front of them, but they have to commit. Again, you can't just straddle this line. Like, okay, are you going to trade for Bradley Beal and build this team? Or are you going to make Jaylen and Jason the core and really make them the core, though? Add pieces that complement them. Like, they just have to pick a side, though.
That's so true. The next week is the moment of truth for the Celtics. Low key, this is one of the biggest if Bradley Beal requests a trade, which we all think he's going to, this is one of the biggest weeks of the next literally decade for the Celtics.
Fork in the road.
It's legitimately a huge fork in the road, which is fascinating because either one makes sense. But you have to choose one. And if you keep Jaylen Brown, then what you're saying is Jaylen Brown is not available for any mid-level superstar. So he's not available for Damian Lillard. You are the Jaylen and Jason team. And for better or worse, you hope that Jason wants to stick around for that. But we've said it before, Tatum has no real connection to Boston. I don't think he particularly cares that he's hooping in Boston. You can make him care. What a stretch this is going to be. This is going to be a fascinating week here.
I do want to make one last point, which is that even though Brad and Ime in their press conferences have been saying Jason and Jaylen are the pillars, everything we do is to complement them, I don't take that as any indication of their plans. I don't take that as a reflection of what is to come in the future. At one point, we were having press conferences talking about the pairing of Gordon Hayward and Isaiah Thomas. They're just going to talk about what's in the now, and I don't think them stating that precludes them from any sort of move. They've been saying all the right things, but I just don't view that really as a factor, I guess, in this decision.
I think that's fair. What else are they supposed to say, right? They're not going to go up there and say, Jason is the building block and we might trade Jaylen. I don't know. But say Bradley Beal comes out this week and does request a trade, right? The Celtics know that they hold the key. It is far and above the best package. So if Bradley Beal is on the market, if he does end up requesting a trade this week, the Celtics know damn well that if they want to, they have the best package out there. It's just going to be fascinating to see if they're willing to part ways with that.
If they were able to just say to the Wizards, look, we're going 1-for-1.
Puts Tommy Shepard in a tough spot.
I honestly think in the end, Tommy Shepard would have to take it. And if you do that, then the Celtics still have their entire, they don't have a ton of superstar young guys, but they keep all their young guys. They keep all their future picks. If they want to go try to get a third guy, if there's somebody who wants to play with Beal and Tatum, there is that. And if they don't do that, then then it's a little precarious, but then they get to employ Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for the foreseeable future. Like, both pathways are good as long as they pick one, but they have to pick one and they have to commit hard to it immediately. All right, guys, I think we can leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for rating and reviewing. Thank you to anybody who gets in touch with us. Please feel free. Any questions, comments, or concerns, you know where to find us, and we will talk to you all again later this week.
On July 23, 1993, basketball superstar Michael Jordan's father, James Jordan, was murdered in North Carolina.
This is the father of the most famous athlete on the planet, and on his 57th birthday, he was an unidentified dead man in the middle of nowhere.
From WRAL Studios, available now is Follow the Truth, where we dig into the story of the James Jordan murder and the man who says he didn't do it.
I know that if this was not Michael Jordan's father, I wouldn't be in prison.
We'll question the evidence.
Is it possible for a man to be shot in his car and authorities not find any blood?
Our ballistics expert says it couldn't have happened.
Shed light on the mystery that has always surrounded the murder.
Whether his financial dealings could have had anything to do with his death.
And uncover bombshell new developments.
Here we are, a quarter century later, and the back cover on this whole murder case isn't yet closed.
Follow the Truth on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen.